Good afternoon. Hey, everybody. It's Patricia, and we are dealing with your diabetes today. This week, I've been talking about all the myths and crazy things that people say about diabetes, and we're going to continue that trend today. Really picking up with some of the names and labels and things people say, which I'm going to warn you in advance. This is one of my rants, so I get really kind of emotional about this, but we'll get through it. So, first I'll start with the medical side of things. So what I've learned from my training, what I understand about how the medical community works, and then I'd like to share a couple of examples of some things that have happened recently that I think there were better ways people could have handled it, but we'll just chat about it. So we talk about labels, and that was my image, really talking about, if you are calling my numbers good or bad, you are judging. I spend a ton of time with my clients just talking about, what those numbers mean. And, those numbers are not an indication of your value or your worth. Just we'll put that right out there. But from the medical side, we're always taught to assess all the information and try to find something that's broken and fix it. That's just how the medical system works. With the advent of electronic medical records, they've even included, like in your care plan, you have to have a problem on your problem list. So by nature, when you see a physician, there's a problem. And if you live with a chronic illness, maybe there's not a problem. It just is how it is. So when we go to the doctor or we talk with them, they are searching for something that's not right. And so when they look at our lab values and they see these numbers that are out of range, first of all, the human body is always in motion. The only time it's not in motion is when we're dead. And so as things change, right, our blood pressure goes up and down, our heart rate goes up and down, our blood sugars go up and down. That's normal. And when we look at lab values, there's a range that's normal values. And those ranges are an average of a bunch of different people. So it's not that you're supposed to be perfectly in the middle. It's that when we look at a lot of people, most of them tend to live there. Well, not everybody is most everybody, right? We're all different. And so one of the great lessons that we learned in nursing school was treat the patient, not the monitor. And so we would look at, one blood pressure does not indicate what you're going to do. You're going to take a series of them, just like our blood sugars, just like our heart rate. They're always in flux, and what you're looking for is a trend. When something trends, that's something important. But one value out of a bunch, now I want to caveat that there are certain numbers when they get too high or too low that are mission critical. So, if your blood sugar is 20, that's not a trend. That's probably something we really need to address. Not probably, it is. But when we're looking at those numbers, we're in and out of range. So there's value as a clinician. When I worked in the ER, we would have somebody come in, we weren't sure what's going on, we would get all this information, you would look at it, and the information gave you clues, right? So there is value to it. But again, living with a chronic illness, I use, oh, your numbers are bad. Oh, your numbers are good. I like your numbers. I don't like your numbers. Ooh, what happened with this number? What happened last Tuesday? They will go and find all these numbers. And my classic favorite is, I would get on my voicemail, I would go, they draw your labs, and you get the results a couple days later from the nurse. And I'm a nurse, and I'm going to say this to, the nurses that said it, but I get this voice saying the doctor would like to see your number at X or higher or lower or whatever. And it gets my goat because the doctor really doesn't have permission to want my numbers to be anything. I pay him for his advice, and I can take it or not. That's my priority and my right, but I get to like what my numbers are, and I get to decide if I can live with that or not. I think most of us do the best we can with what we have. So, let's say your number, your A1C was 6.6 and the doctor wanted it less than 6.5. Okay, great. But what if the last time you'd been in, it was 9? So if you went from a 9 to a 6.6, that's something to celebrate and be proud of, and atta girl, keep it up. Not, you weren't 6.5, so we want you to be better. The weight of both of those are so different. And I consider myself a pretty strong person, and I'm very keen with the medical industry and how the human body works and what diabetes is. But I cannot tell you how many times I left a doctor's office in tears because I felt like I was failing. Like I didn't do it right. My numbers weren't good enough. I had too many bad numbers, right? These labels are just so harmful. So I firmly believe, and I mean this, I can only think of one person where it might not have been true, but none of us, A, want diabetes, and B, we don't want our numbers to be bad. It's just a lot harder than anybody says, and it's not easy to be perfect. One person I had a patient one time who used to intentionally give herself extra insulin to go low so the ambulance would come and people would pay attention to her. That's the only one, and that's very much the exception to the rule. But those numbers, those values, it actually causes people fear where they don't want to check their blood sugar because they don't want to see that number and feel like they didn't do it well enough. So the good and the bad serve no purpose. It's just data. It's just information. And you have to take that number, just like treat the patient, not the machine. You have to take that number in the context of everything else that's going on. So maybe somebody's lost a job. Maybe they don't have enough money to buy the healthier foods and they're going with, cheaper versions, pasta, starch, things like that. They're cheaper. It's easier to feed a family. Maybe they're stressed out. Maybe they're between jobs. You just never know what the context of that is. And there have been times where it's just really hard to make it all happen. So I just say that that's kind of the first pretext of all this is, commenting on somebody else's numbers really doesn't help them, and especially when you're labeling them as good or bad. So then I want to share with you a couple little stories of what's happened also on that same vein this last week. So I met someone last week who was in the medical industry, and when she found out what I did, she starts sharing her story of someone that she knows that has diabetes, and their A1C was really bad. It was so high. Can you believe it? And I said, well, sure, I can believe it. If she's feeling afraid or confused or she doesn't understand, of course, why wouldn't her numbers be high? So she went on to tell me how she had helped this woman get her blood sugar levels down, get her A1C down. And it was funny to me because I realized that she took the credit and it was really the lady. She further started to talk about how this lady was older and overweight and didn't do what she was supposed to, just very derogatory. And I had to share with her, I'm like, she really doesn't want to be that way. Have you ever considered maybe that's the best she can do with what she has? Maybe she doesn't know how to face a really hard problem and tackle it head on. Maybe that's the best she can do. And, she kept going, no, and she would roll her eyes and she's like, she just doesn't get it. Just, again, so derogatory. And I was trying to be nice because we were in a public place, but I just thought, that's just not helpful. So, again, everybody does the best they can with what they have. Nobody really wants to feel this way or have bad numbers. Why would they? But if you think about it, when we're stressed and we're upset and we have issues, what's the first thing we have ever been taught when we're upset? We use food, right? From the moment we were first born, we cried, they gave us food. So it's really deeply ingrained to self-soothe with food. So anyway, I'm sure most anybody who is diabetic has had some sort of encounter. So I want to offer you something a little different, and again, by way of a story. So I met a gentleman, it's been a couple of years now maybe, and he started kind of griping about his wife, and she was type 2, and she did blah, blah, and didn't do X, Y, Z, and, on and on and on. And just, he was really frustrated with her. He was mad. And so I said, you know what, the next time she does that, I want you to trust me, and I want you to tell her this. And I want you to tell her, I am so sorry this happened to you. I don't know how you deal with this every day because it's such a hard struggle. I just don't know how you do it. It's just amazing. And you know what? Sometimes it must be hard. So I told him that, and he kind of did an eyebrow raise and he wasn't too sure. But I saw him several weeks later, and he came back and he said, oh my gosh, I have to tell you, we're in a meeting. And he actually stood up and complimented me in front of the group and just said, she told me a way to handle this situation, and I was a big skeptic. He said, but my wife was, fussing around, and her diabetes wasn't where she wanted it. And I did what Patricia said, and I kind of gave her empathy and just said, I don't know how you do it. I'm so sorry you have to deal with this. And he said, she just melted. She was so happy that somebody understood her struggle and that she wasn't trying to be bad, quote unquote, on purpose, right? She was doing the best she could. It's just not that easy. But that little bit of empathy and compassion and understanding, he said it changed their marriage almost, because he just was able to see from a different viewpoint. And you have to realize when loved ones are critical, it's their own stuff, right? They don't want you to be sick, and they don't want to have to deal with the fact that you may have longer term problems. So I've talked to Wendy. I could probably talk about this all day, but I'm going to wrap up. So watch those labels, watch the comment, support, support, support. You will find that when people feel better, they do better. And when they feel criticized and judged, they feel worse. And it's much more likely that people will give up. So that's my tip for this week. Watch those labels, take care, deal with your diabetes, and I will see you next Thursday. Thanks.